Okay, hi everybody. I know it's been a long time since I've done any kind of recordings for y'all, just to go over brief ideas, things we have going on in open source. Just last year has been intense, just with delivery and stuff like that. But now that we're through budget process and we're getting the Possum live and all that stuff, I did want to highlight specific things in these quick videos to help guide people about how to interact with them. So the first thing, unrelated to the paid open source model, is the incubation process that we have for Intersect. And I have to clarify that this is different than an accelerator. An accelerator typically is associated with VCs and capital raising, and you have guidance and mentorship that way. This is different. This is an incubation process, and it does go by other synonymous names, but it's primarily based on like the Linux Foundation. Since Intersect is also an MBO, what we're trying to do is open the door now for the community to use Intersect as a neutral hub to steward your code base. And we're doing it through two options. One, which is similar to like how the Linux Foundation only does it one way, which is where you kind of surrender your trademark to the organization where they rebrand it, host it, and go through that process. And then the other one is where you can retain your own project's trademark. And this is where we're being different, where essentially you can keep your IP, still host the project, and we would apply Intersect governance with that and be co-managers with that project as long as you see fit and you don't and you see a need to stay within the incubation process. What we're trying to do is keep this open for everybody in the community to just use Intersect as a catalyst, not wrong term, as a method for growing your project and ensuring maturity on a standard scale, at least. So welcome to Intersect's incubation program. And I'll go ahead and just do a quick rundown if I can get the loading to work with me today. So what we have is Intersect's project incubation process. Now, this is on our Gitbook. I'll keep the description in the video. But what this does is we're trying to support open source projects in the Cardano ecosystem, provide a structured path to grow ideas, to grow a sustainable community-led, and you'll get to use the assistance of having the committees and the members of this organization help with your project as they can steward guidance, resources, and visibility towards things. Things to note is what incubation does do for your project. We will support the growth of it. We provide structured mentorship and resources. This is where the open source office and the open source committee tie directly into your project. We help build a community around that and try to make sure that that project gets to a mature status within our lifecycle framework. We also make sure that the project is going to align with Intersect's mission, governance standards, and open source best practices. Technical development, which is where you can get assistance from product, as well as the technical steering committee on roadmap validation, technical mentoring as you need it. Basically, we are a resource to you. The other thing that we assist with is building community. We can do different things within the Possum or within Intersect itself about getting contributors and maintainers for your project. And help things that way. And we will also basically will help you try to find out funding strategies. This does not, I'll clarify that point here in a minute, but we aren't guaranteeing any funding, just that we can assist with helping you find that funding. As well as long-term adoption pathways. What we want to do is have Intersect help be that network marketing to get adoption and hopefully even enterprise adoption later on. And then we do provide visibility. So that's the biggest thing of why you would pay to be a part of the Linux Foundation is marketing and visibility within that ecosystem. We can do the same thing to help with that. So it's not just one guy behind a project. The things to clarify which we do not do for you, we will not write your code. We will not replace the project leadership. We're not guaranteeing any funding with anyone for this. We don't cover third-party dependencies, and no project is able to bypass the maturity standard. If you do not clearly meet the guidelines for what we've clarified, you will stay in that incubation phase, or if you don't touch the project, it'll become the red line and then get abandoned at some point, or archived, I think is the term we used. So what Intersect itself is offering anyone that comes in the incubation process, basically you get them internship, governance, community growth, sustainability, visibility, all that fun stuff. Now, the question becomes, okay, you're down for the process. What do you do to actually apply? It's 4 easy steps. The little chart here kind of go over what it is. I'm trying not to make this complicated. It kind of can be, but I'm more detail oriented when it comes to slides, so I'd rather give you more information than you need. But essentially, there is a ClickUp form on this Gitbook page, and what it means is the process starts here, where you could be an open source library, a product, or a community recommended project, or it's your own self-nomination. We classify you as the supplier. Basically, you'll put into that ClickUp form these kind of inputs, and then what we recommend pre-submission is making sure that you read this incubation process outline, you understand that the criteria is there prior to submission, and you also try to self-assess where you think your project is on the maturity curve, and I can show that life cycle form here in a minute. But essentially, you would do that before you click submit on the project submission form. And then once you get to this step, we do have an optional working group peer review. So if the open source committee has active working groups, you can run your project by them prior to submission to make sure you're aligning with criteria. This would mostly be for like the tooling working group right now that's overseeing a sustainability budget. They have their own criteria for what they're doing within that program, but that criteria could help with this too via how they're managing that. But essentially, once you click that form, someone from the open source office will receive it, review it, make sure that it aligns with what's needed, and then we meet with the OSC chair and vice chair to ensure that they're good to put the agenda, and they do what we call the summary review, i.e. if your project is not aligned with the inputs or the pre-submission steps, or it doesn't align with Intersect, we may do a summary decision making and email you what that is, or if you need more things to add and resubmit. That's only there to prevent the backlog of the committee agendas from being filled with just all requests. But if everything's good, we would go to the OSC agenda, which is where for your project to be approved, you have to go through the open source committee and the technical steering committee. So the first step comes through the open source office. We get you in front of the open source committee. It gets added to your agenda, and they'll have either an offline discussion on it via async, or they'll do it during the actual call itself. And essentially, there's two decisions that are made, which is the go or no go. A go means they've approved it and we push it to the TSC for them to do their peer review, or we need more requirements, reach back out to you, and either it's a rejection, which means you can apply again in 6 months, or you got 30 days to get the added information and resubmit. But if you get the go, that means you go to the TSC. TSC does their own similar review. They can do it async or in a call. And if you get accepted, then you have one of two choices. I'll clarify that in a minute. But essentially, the incubation process begins from there. There's a little legal paperwork to be done. And then we go through the outputs and try to help cascade your project towards the community. So I'll go ahead and exit out of that. But that's all explained here. And this is where we come into the ownership and governance. So if you've been accepted, there's two primary pathways, which is and something to clarify is when you submit your project to the incubation process under Intersect, you and your team still become the primary team. And anyone who interacts, you basically have autonomy on your project. All we're doing is adhering standards to that and helping you grow that project and sustain it and make sure there's a maturity life cycle. But when you come to Intersect, like I mentioned earlier, there's two options, which is you can foster the IP under Intersect. This would be similar to the Linux Foundation, where you surrender your project's IP and trademark. They'll help cascade it. And essentially, the submitting team continues as the core maintainers. We'll set up a team structure for you, but we are neutral stewards of the code base and just make sure that no single company controls the project and the ecosystem can safely adopt it. That's one traditional format. The other one that we are doing is allowing you to retain the IP, but align with Intersect processes. So This is where you'll basically fall under how we do our governance policy, the security policy, and help manage your project that way. But you're kind of still independent and you can pull out of incubation at any point. But we will still be essentially governing that project to make sure it follows standards. And that's basically it. And if you want to apply, here's the form. It's basic steps once it loads. But yeah, so you'll come here. This will be the project incubation request. Will require email, project summary, name, description. What is the priority of the project? Basically understanding how it's supported by community input, organizational repo, website, blah, blah, blah. And then we'll ask some basic things if you have a maintainers contributing MD, and then ask you why Intersect benefit to the landscape of Intersect, i.e. the projects we already have, your Cardano fit, and your integration path, and then any overlaps that you currently have. And that's it. So if anyone has any questions, you are free to reach out to me or Tex or the open source committee. But that's a brief explainer video about how that works. And I'll see y'all again soon.